The House will have under consideration House Bill number 354. Good gentleman from District 23.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent that we dispense with further reading of House Bill 354. Well, first off, I'd like to declare that I'm a public school teacher, so I'm assuming that's a Rule 80. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? The gentleman referenced a declaration under Rule 80. I'm declaring it a large class and unnecessary. So please proceed.
This is the appropriation bill for Idaho's teachers. This is the appropriation bill for the Teachers Division, which provides state and federal funding support for grades K-12 for instructional and pupil service salaries and benefits and other programs specific to certified instructors in Idaho school districts and public charter schools. This particular budget is a teacher career ladder. If we look around Idaho, there's 15 or so thousand public educators, charter schools, public schools, and we're looking at the passing of their career ladder. This is pretty heartfelt for me. I know that there's a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion about education. As I stand here and represent a large group that has dedicated their lives to the state of Idaho, to our youth, and to the future of Idaho, we need to come together as a group and support this group. I've had the blessing of two of the most wonderful careers a human being could ever desire to have. I protected our nation as a combat aviator for 20 years, and when I was done with that, I thought, what else can I do? And I decided to dedicate my life to public service and to education. I know a lot of teachers in this state, and I want to make sure that you're all comfortable that these teachers feel like I do. They are there for the students. They are there for the communities, and they are there to make sure that our students are career ready, that our students have the skills that are necessary for them to go and pursue their dream. If I look at some of the things that I've tried to do, I've been very, very fortunate. I think the discussion on civics education is a discussion that we need to have. I have loved civics education. I have created environments for my students to meet elected officials. We have ran candidate forums at my high school. One year we had 6 people running for mayor, and they had forums everywhere, and I got all 6 mayor candidates to come to school. The newspaper came and did a write-up and wrote in their article that it was the best forum that they were able to witness because the students were asking questions and they were accepting differences and they were listening. They came in wanting to know. I even one year was lucky enough, my students said, hey, let's invite the President of the United States to graduation. And I said, sure. So we wrote the letter and all 180 of us signed it. And every time the phone rings, I always tell my students, just a minute, it's the White House. Well, this one time in April, the phone rang and I said, just a minute, it's the White House. And I answered the phone and it was the White House. And I said, hey, it's the White House. And they didn't believe me. I said, no, really. So I said, can I put you on speakerphone? I put them on speakerphone and they said, this is the White House Office of Scheduling. we'd like to let you know the president's a little bit busy that day, but he appreciates your invitation to come to Mountain Home High School. Another year, they decided in the governor's race to invite all the major candidates to come to school. And guess what? We had one show up. And he ended up becoming the gentleman on the second floor. He took a few minutes out of his day on his way back from Idaho Falls to Boise to spend 45 minutes talking to two of my classes. I had students from all my other classes coming in. Now, I don't want to just focus on me. These type of things go on all around the state. But I do want to take you on a short little tour of Mountain Home High School. I'm not going to go in every classroom, but I'm going to go in a couple. I want you guys to know what you're voting for. I want you folks to know that you're voting for the future of Idaho. If I go across the hall, the math teacher is in the National Guard. So when he goes off to drill, those students know he's serving our nation. They know he's ready to defend them. I go down the hall and turn left, and I have a teacher who has set up writing labs to help kids get into college. I turn the other hall, and I have a teacher that teaches German, and I was able to participate with her in 3 exchanges. We've taken 60 students from Mountain Home, and we have lived in Germany. My sweet wife got to go, and she knows how to say hello, goodbye, and talk about the weather in German with the Germans, and that's pretty cool. I go down the hall, and there's our chemistry teacher, who I like to jokingly refer to as the smartest human in the world, and he just smiles at me. But this guy has read the Harry Potter series in Latin to encourage his students to learn. 2 more classrooms, I promise. I go down the hall a little bit farther, and there's our history teacher, who 2 summers ago dressed up in his Civil War uniform and was a part of the Gettysburg campaign in July in his uniform, and he brings that back to the students. I want you all to think of, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your child, maybe it's your close friend that teaches public education. That's who you're voting for right now. We are voting for the career ladder to pay those people the salaries that we have set in code, we've set in ordinance, that they need. I could go on and on. I promise you one more classroom, but I'll let you sometime ask me what that last classroom is in private. I'm willing to answer any questions you have about public education. I'm willing to talk to you about teachers. I'm willing to convince you, to convey to you the great work that they do. I ask for your support on the career ladder and to support Idaho's teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, good gentlemen. Is there further debate? Lady from 10.
Thank you, Speaker. So 32 years as a teacher and an administrator, and I assure you that there were times that I had to have visits with certain teachers about things that I felt like were inappropriate, sometimes leaning or outright social Marxist kinds of activities or ideologies. And that is the job of an administrator, I think, is to be in classrooms, know what's going on, and that we need to make sure that the morals and the mores of our community are being adhered to. That was my job, and I really enjoyed my job. I also learned in that job that you can't or shouldn't, because there are a few that are not doing what they should do, then judge everybody else in that same way. So I'm standing here to tell you that the majority of the teachers that I had the pleasure and the honor to work with are good people who would, that if you sat down and had a conversation with them, if you were in their classroom, you would not see them advocating for social justice activism, some kind of ideology that we feel like is not in keeping with what Americans see as a free and a way to have liberty, would understand that sometimes I wonder if we're indivisible, but I certainly believe that we are as strong as we keep our trust in what these 4 gold words say in our chamber, and that we need to not judge everyone by the actions of possibly a few. And I would just end by saying, in my 32 years in 2 different school districts, a public charter school, I never saw any of this happening, and I still don't see that happening. And as a person in my local community, if I did, it is up to me to do something about that. I regret that I put my language about tuition and not funding ideologies that are not in keeping with Idaho values in administrative intent language. I have been told that it needs to go through the legislative process. It should have gone ahead and gone through the Education Committee. That's what we should do for K-12 too, put it through in legislation. So I respectfully ask that you reconsider voting down the budget and think, as Representative Bundy said, of the support of all those that are doing the right things for the right reasons in the right way. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Lady from 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our teachers are great, and we need to fund our teachers, but we need to protect our teachers from being forced to teach this garbage of social justice, including critical race theory.
State your objection. All right. The lady is choosing her words carefully, as usual.
Thank you.
And those chosen words have raised an objection. So please proceed with that in mind and make your points. As always, they're valid.
Thank you. Teachers are given curriculum. They are given direction, and they are given agendas, and they need to stick to what they're being told to do. I have no problem funding teachers. I just believe that this bill needs some intent language put in it to protect our teachers. I have teachers that are afraid to speak out, that call me, and they're afraid to speak out because they have house payments and they cannot leave their jobs. Intent language in here would just be one extra step we could do as legislators to help protect them from teaching stuff that is ideology and that is undermining our very foundations of this country. And it is happening. And schools are not like they used to be. Things are different. There's a lot of ideology coming into our schools. And I would just encourage you to return this back to JFAC and let them put some intent language in to protect our teachers. And I urge you to vote no on this bill.
Is there further debate? Good lady from 23.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the comments from the good gentleman from 23, and I can honestly say that he is one of the best teachers my children have had. And they appreciate him, does a great job, and it's always a pleasure to hear when they get back from his class. Even though they're seniors, when they have him, they get excited and they like his projects. So with that, I would like to remind the body, this is about paying our teachers. If you want to discuss curriculum choices or things that need to be addressed and choices that are made by districts, this is not your budget. This is about paying our teachers, which are good people and deserve our support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Gentleman from 29.
Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at a document that the good lady from District 7 apparently wants to discuss with the body. It's EL Education. EL Education provides the curriculum.
Speaker, I object. He's talking about a document about a bill further down on the schedule, not this bill.
All right. Is this what we're talking about?
Okay.
It's House Bill 356, and therefore not germane to this discussion. Okay. Gentleman from 24.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This budget is about teachers and paying teachers. Even if we were to put intent language to protect the teachers in this bill, I'm not sure if that's the appropriate place to do that. But one of the complaints I always hear is teachers that are wandering off and doing things that aren't approved by the school board. We hear a lot more of that. In fact, some of the legislation we've seen earlier this year and in past years has to do with things that are being taught in the classroom that the state or the school boards know nothing about. We also hear about giving local decisions. I agree that we should be very careful of what we're teaching, what curriculums we choose, and I think a lot of the things that I hear about some of this social justice issues, some of this goes too far. Most of that has been leveled at the university level, not at the high school level. And I've not seen any evidence. I've not heard any complaints from any parents anywhere. And as chairman of education, I haven't heard these complaints. I hear rumors and we shouldn't do this, but no specifics. There's no specifics about this. And I think that what we need to be looking at here is this the appropriate amount that we should be budgeting to pay these teachers and for the work they're doing? If the teachers feel they need protections, they haven't come to us either to ask for special intent language. So I urge you to support this bill. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Good lady from 30.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a historic day. Never have I stood to debate against a public school budget, but that day has arrived. I have asked for these budgets to be held until we could do it the proper way and get the policy passed that prohibits discrimination on the basis of race or sex or any other aspect. That policy has not moved, and therefore I believe this budget needs to be returned to JFAC to add policy that prohibits discrimination and prohibits teaching that the discrimination on the basis of race or sex is a good thing for our children to hear. Unity and diversity are not opposites. The way we get to university is by fostering an atmosphere of inclusion and respect for all viewpoints. And if we can't get the policy passed, then I'm willing to put it in a budget that prohibits discrimination. That's why I'll be voting no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate? Lady from 31.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, this has been an important conversation that's been begun this year. I will tell you that I love teachers. I appreciate teachers. My degree is in education. And for me, this is not about teachers. This is about a process and about our responsibility as a legislature to address important issues, which, by the way, cut across partisan lines and affect everyone. Now, it's been said that there's no evidence that this is being taught in our K-12 schools, and I don't have any documents I can shop in front of you. But I can tell you that I have talked to parents in my district, in my districts, my legislative district, I won't say which school district, who tell me that their high school students are getting critical race theory from their government teacher in my district. So I do believe that it's an issue that needs to be addressed. It's not a fringe issue. It's a mainstream issue, and it should be of significant concern to every one of us, regardless of which party we're associated with or what we think our politics are. So I will be supporting the good lady from 30. Thank you.
Is there further debate? From 19.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel obligated after coming in here and just objecting that I should probably contribute something meaningful. So just two quick observations. Idaho Code 67-5909 already prohibits discrimination on all the things we're talking about, so I don't think we want to reinvent the wheel there. And secondly, I haven't seen an update to this study in a couple years ago, but a couple years ago the State Department of Education published a report about what's happening in our teacher pipeline. Where are the leaks? Where are the inputs? Where are the outputs? And I was shocked, and I suspect that the number hasn't changed materially, but I was shocked to hear that every year about 1,000 of our licensed educators leave the profession. Not to move to another school, but they move out of state, They decide they want to go be welders or legislators, but they decide to stop teaching. And the fact that we don't pay them, and the fact that we have conversations like this every time it's time to pay them, exacerbate the situation. We have a constitutional obligation to maintain public school system, so let's not get too far astray here. Let's fund our teachers. Let's fund the good gentleman from 23.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Good gentleman from District 9.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a couple of comments about this. I would guess about 99% of all of our teachers are handling this properly. School boards are in charge of curriculum in Idaho, and obviously they're sometimes too far away and too busy to monitor all of it. But just looking around the country, I'm gonna even though we've heard a little bit about this going on in the public schools, I'm gonna guess that this is going to become a little bit bigger and bigger deal. The discussions in schools in the next few years. So the question is, what's the appropriate way to handle this? How do we do something without implicating the entire education system for doing something that they're not doing? How do we slide in here and just take a stand and make it clear that we want our kids having these issues addressed in a proper fashion? So, this has been a good discussion, but it makes sense to me that we would do this through a bill in the Germain Committee. We complain about this quite a bit, that JFACS, us guys in the Germain Committees are always complaining, JFAC's doing our jobs. Well, here's a particular case that is extremely clear that this is a matter of what gets taught in the classrooms, which is clearly a House Ed issue. So to try to take the right approach here and not throw a sledgehammer at this and upset the whole deal, it would make sense to me that we would pass this bill. This is strictly about teacher salaries. I'm going to say one more thing. They haven't even, the Board of Examiners took away $54 million, and here the teachers have, and I'm going to, except for maybe 350 in one of our local district bad actors that did some dumb stuff, the other 18,650 have done a phenomenal job. This has been a tough year. Okay, in many cases early in the year, you had to teach online and in class. You had face shield. You have masks. This has been a tough year. Okay, and we didn't even give them their raises for this year, the year we're in, because the Board of Examiners held that money back. So, ladies and gentlemen, we need to tell the educators in Idaho that we appreciate them this year, and you can have an asterisk for the bad actors. I'm not going to cover anybody that did some dumb stuff. Okay, but you're over 18,000 people that have really worked their tails off. We need to say right now, thank you. And here's the money that you should have got at the beginning of the year, and I hope every school districts better pay those people this money when they get it. I think probably in May or whenever they get it. Say thank you, and at the same time come back in the Germain Committee and make a policy that doesn't, like I said earlier, implicate everybody and make it sound like all these bad things are happening all over the place, because they're not. We have a lot of school board members and administrators and teachers with really good judgment, okay, and they're not doing this stuff. Some probably are. So this is a really good time to come in with the right amount of pressure and handle a situation, and that's in the Germain Committee, and thank our teachers by passing this budget.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 34.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose the bill. I agree in part with the good gentleman from District 9. I do agree that we respect our teachers in Idaho. It's part of our job as a legislature to make sure that the work of education gets done and gets done well. It's in our Constitution. Part of that is making sure that we fund education appropriately, including paying our teachers well for the great professionals they are. We also have other stewardships to make sure students are being served well in Idaho, that the education money we spend goes to facilitating an education that helps them develop themselves professionally and academically. We also have another stewardship involved with the stewardship of taxpayer dollars, making sure that when we spend the money that it is going for good purposes, because our taxpayers are compelled to send these dollars to us with the responsibility to make sure that it is spent well. As we spend these dollars, and these are some of the biggest budgets we'll see this session, these education budgets, we need to make sure that they are fulfilling the mission of education without going into areas that are against Idaho values and American values. And social justice and critical race theory, we've seen earlier this session, has reared its head in pre-K, it's reared its head in higher education, and we know it's also becoming a problem in K through 12 education. All we're asking for is to make sure the intent language is there, to make sure that teachers are protected, students are protected, and that these dollars are spent for the purposes we intend them to be spent for. If you argue that this is a policy decision and it needs to be done through a separate bill, through a germane committee, great. I can be with you there. Let's work on that bill. Let's get it done. Put this one on hold and get that done. And then we can vote on the budgets with a clear conscience. Until then, we need to make sure that when we spend this money, it ought to be in intent language until we get that policy clear. So I'm a no for now, but I'd love to engage on policy or bring this back after that's done. Thank you.
8 from 8. That's you.
Thank you, Speaker. To speak in opposition to the bill, and again, I'm a teacher. Many of you know that. Lifelong teacher. And I agree with the good gentleman from, eight. No, anyway, I'm sorry. Representative Nate, I can't see his number. Okay. Anyway, with what he's just stated, but I'd also like to comment on the good gentleman from 9. So he talks about how we can address this in the germane committee. Well, I sit on the education committee as well as he does. And, you know, last year we addressed removing Common Core with a letter. To the State Department and State Board of Education that we wanted to replace Common Core on the first line of that letter. And so far we haven't had any luck in replacing Common Core. It's just been a matter of adjusting some of the standards and moving them into different grade levels and so forth. What we want to do is replace Common Core. So it's all good in theory that we want to deal with the germane committee. However, when we're just writing letters, we're supposed to be making law, not supposed to be just writing letters. So in theory, it all sounds good, and we do need separate bills to address these policies. So anyway, I'm going to vote no. I do support teachers. I know they need better funding as time goes on, but I think we also need to deal with this issue this year and not keep kicking the can down the road, because that seems what we do every year. And when our NAEP scores are not high, when our graduation rates have been lowered, we've got a systemic problem, and it's going to take some real forethought in changing this. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 16.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My head is just absolutely spinning right now in listening to a lot of this debate. And I think what I'd like to share is to kind of bring it back to part of what the gentleman from 23 had shared in his opening. And I'd like to invite you to Mr. McCrosty's classroom. And Mr. McCrosty's classroom at the beginning of the year was here. It was inside this computer. Ladies and gentlemen, as someone who has taught school for 18 years in the state of Idaho, the 2 hardest years for me were the very first year when I did not know what I was doing, And this year, when I know absolutely what I'm doing and I have to transform it all and I need to put it into this little box, I don't have time to teach critical race theory. Are you kidding me? I have to just prepare my content for the next day. This whole discussion on critical race theory coming into classrooms this year, that's nuts.
Continue your debate.
Thank you. The only problem with this budget is that it's too short because the teachers are working too hard and they're not being compensated enough. I'm willing to support this budget because I know how hard that our teachers have worked this year. And as the good gentleman from 9 referred to, they actually got the 5% holdback. And so they were denied that. The teachers in this state have been working incredibly hard this year. And I know the good gentleman from 23 knows that, and I know that. And I ask you to give this your green light.
Is there further debate? Lady from 5.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the great debate today. One of the hardest decisions or positions I was put in when I was working, we had a theft of some computers from one of the departments that worked underneath me. And when we went to evaluation time, my boss told me he wanted me to give that person a bad evaluation because those computers had some sensitive information on them, and he didn't feel like they had been protected strongly enough. And yet that individual who worked for me worked very, very hard, and he followed the policy of the institution where I was working. He followed it to the letter. And yet my boss wanted me to give him a bad evaluation because he didn't make up what he was supposed to be doing. He just was following the policy that was in place at the moment. And so I argued about giving this wonderful gentleman a bad evaluation, and when it was apparent to me that my supervisor wanted to have a scapegoat, I said, fine, I want the same evaluation that you give him, that you're making me give him, that's the evaluation I want. Because I'm not going to be responsible for giving him a bad evaluation when we have some responsibility ourselves as supervisors. What we do here makes a difference. We send a message, and what we're saying is we're going to send a message to our teachers that what they're doing is wrong. Well, whose responsibility is that? There are budgets sandwiched on both sides of this budget, one for the administrators, one for the operations. Maybe that's a better place. But again, whose responsibility is this? The teachers are doing the best that they can. Idaho's economy is doing so well because our teachers went back to work. And maybe there were some that didn't, but I'll tell you what, in my district, they did. And that made sure that the farmers and the ranchers and the loggers and those folks that are working minimum wage jobs could go back to work. And God bless our teachers. I'm not willing to put intent language in a budget where it doesn't belong. And so I urge you to consider if intent language is the difference that you want to make, then put it in the right budget. The teacher's budget is not it. The administrator's budget perhaps is. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Lady from 9.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose this so that we can protect both the teachers and the children. I know for a fact that this is being taught in our schools. In my district, a teacher was not given a contract because she refused to teach the 1619 project. It was free curriculum, and she knew what it was, and she would not teach her elementary students that. And she went and told her parents what was really in that. And because she refused when it came up for her contract, they were told, we will not renew your contract. You're a troublemaker. So this is to protect our teachers. We all love our teachers. By refusing this and sending it back to JFAC for intent language does not mean that we're saying we're not going to pay you. It means we're going to try to protect both you and the students. Thank you.
Is there further debate? A lady from 26.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, am one of the educators that stand in this body. There's several of us here. I appreciate the good comments from the gentleman from 23, the good lady from 10, and my sparring partner, basically, from District 9. We go around and around on policy. We talk about Common Core, next generation science standards. We have talked negotiations, all looking at it. And lo and behold, we both have certification in secondary mathematics. So we even talk quadratic formulas. But those are the conversations. This budget is about our teachers and the kids that they touch every single day. Yes, some are going to say, oh, that's awful. No, it's not. Let's look at the research that says the schools are some of the safest place for kids. What changes a child's life more than anything is the teacher that touches them every single day. Teachers are just like you and I. We have 70 points of view in this body. In classrooms I taught where I negotiated for 73 teachers in our district. All different points of views. I've taught for how many administrators in my time? Again, all different points of view. We sat down, we talked about it, we came to a consensus, just like this body. Nobody gets their way 100% of the time. It is not my way or the highway. Shame on you if you think that's how it works in our world. It is those conversations that we find the middle ground, truly the best solutions. Policy is not the place in this budget. I agree with the good lady from District 5. Maybe it needs to be administrators. Maybe we need to have the conversation. But I believe this is local control. We promised teachers for 13 years on parts of that career ladder. And it still hasn't gotten completely what we promised. Oh, maybe we don't keep our promises. We worked really hard. Our career ladder is in statute. It got held how many times? We've worked very hard in this body to value those teachers. They've done everything we've asked them to. Even the career ladder, which was a heavy lift from this body, to put them into an accountability mode. It's based on how their test scores. We even put the evaluation model, it's called a Charlotte Danielson model, that everybody's had to learn. And you know what? We need to support them and not punish them. Teachers work so hard for our communities. They're our neighbors. We sit next to them in church. We take and share Friday night ball games. This is not the time nor the place to tell them how bad they are. This is the time and place to say we appreciate you for everything you do, and this needs to be a record.
Mr. Speaker, I object.
You object to that part?
I do. I think a number of us that have spoken have made it clear that this is not a message to the teachers that they are bad. And I object to painting all of us with that motivation.
Your objection is noted. The lady has firsthand knowledge as a teacher of how our actions are interpreted. So her calling it that is a personal interpretation, much as yours is on the other side. So we're at that point where words mean something in this debate. We have a budget for teachers to do here. So the point is well taken. The lady understands the point, and I think she was just about to finish up.
I was. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was the point. There are 70 of us in here, and we need to truly look at what's here, look at how the bill's written. This is a budget bill, not a policy bill. And with that, I would encourage the green light.
Is there further debate? Good gentleman from District 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rarely get up to debate if I'm not the sponsor, but I'd be remiss if I don't, since I happen to be married to a former teacher and someone that's pretty much dedicated most of her professional career to help advancing the teaching profession, and have had the opportunity to get to know many teachers throughout North Idaho because of her work for the University of Idaho. And it's an incredibly valuable and treasured profession. I think this is a budget that was well crafted. There were many of us on JFAC that worked together to craft this budget, and I think this is an appropriate way to fund our teachers division, and I would encourage your green light.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Good lady from District 30, for what purpose do you rise?
To debate for a second time, Mr. Speaker.
Anyone wish to debate the bill for the first time? Good lady from District 33.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Friends, I would be remiss if I didn't stand up and speak. The good lady from 26 made some really fantastic points in the beginning, which had to do with how much we value our teachers. And we do, which was one of the primary reasons that I wanted to see the teachers back in school with our kids, teaching our kids, because our kids love our teachers. That is a fantastic point. I would just like to say this before I go on. Everybody in this room who values the teachers and absolutely respects our teachers, please indicate by remaining seated. That's exactly what I wanted to see. This is not about that. What we are talking about right now is using every tool in our toolbox to make sure that we're doing this also for our children. What are Idaho values? This budget, as far as the financial part, is not going to change. We value our teachers. I want to make sure that we value our kids and that we continue to teach them those values and those things that are going to get them on the right path heading down the road. I also want to say this. I've heard some things in regards to teachers and why maybe they're leaving the profession as though it's just about money. That is so not true. There are so many reasons, including all the things they have to teach. All the regulations. Many of us went into that teaching profession because of the love of kids. Me too. So let's make sure that we're doing the right things for our kids. This bill come back, what, this afternoon? It could come back tomorrow. It's going to be back with just an addition. And then if we can do the right thing, as the good gentleman from 9 said, and get an actual bill, let's do that too. Maybe we can get the bill before the language. We're not taking anything away from our teachers. I'm asking you to give this the red light. Thank you very much.
Is there further debate? Lady from 24.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't have the robustness of the former lady, but I will. Just a few things.
Just think how it would be if she turned her mic on.
Well, okay. What comes to my mind first is local control. You know, and I have great school board. And every time one of you mentions something that's being taught in your district and you're just upset about it, I call all my district. I call teachers, I call the board, I call the district superintendent. My superintendent had to Google what was just mentioned a little earlier to find out what it was. And of course, that taught me that he didn't do it. And he said, we don't teach that. We don't allow that. We teach what we're supposed to be teaching. And I trust. That's the other thing. I trust our local school board. Many of us called all of our school boards. Some of you have multiple school boards, such as the good representative back here from 25. They had to call 7 school boards. And they got the very same answer that I got. Let's trust our local school boards. We do not need intent language in a budget. If you truly have an issue with this, take it back to the Board of Education Committee next year and fix it. I think we've kind of dinked around with this long enough. I just feel like we need to, whether or not the intent is, our teachers do take this as a slap in the face. They're a good bunch of people, and I totally support them, and I ask for your green light on this bill.
Is there further debate? For the first time? Lady from 7.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to ask unanimous consent to refer to several of these budget bills relating to the education appropriation in my debate here.
You've heard the unanimous consent request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, the lady may refer to the other public school budget bills. Is that all right?
Great.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you. So I really love the sentiments of how much we love and support our teachers. This budget is $1.1 billion, the second largest budget that we have the opportunity to vote for. This is an important amount of money. When you have the second largest amount of money, $1.1 billion, that is impacting the future of Idaho, we need to get it right the first time. And so I would like to point your attention to some of the line items in the bill. You know, this discussion of how we're going to attack the teaching and the advocacy of critical theory throughout our entire education system is a huge, it's a huge topic, and it's hard to grab it in one of these bills. When we look at these education bills, so K through 12 is split up into a half dozen or so more bills, of which I wish some of our other education budgets were split up into bills. But when we look at, there's actually 5 different education bills where critical theory is being applied. We can look at one of them, and so it's like, where do we start? But this is the first one out of the gate, and it's the largest one out of the gate. And so I didn't know what bill number to put at the top of my handout. But let's just look at them overall. We have one specifically, it's about $600,000. Another one that another one's $14 million, another $4 million, another $2 million. This one is only $9 million. So out of this $1.1 billion budget, there is a line item. You can look at the statement of purpose. It's $9 million for professional development services. That's what we're talking about. We love our teachers. Let's keep everything else. In fact, we don't mind that $9 million. The problem is that in that teacher development, what is being required for our teachers to undergo is specific training teaching them critical theory. And that needs to stop. And we talk about policy. Yeah, drafted up policy. Has it been allowed to go through the legislative process? No. But here's my debate to that. If we're going to just defer to policy, then my next question for you is in our Constitution where it says no books, papers, tracts, or documents of a political character shall be used or introduced in any school established under the provisions of this article. And that's where the argument is. Critical theory is political in nature, and it violates our Constitution. And how are we, as the legislature, going to stop that violation of our Constitution? We have to do it with the budget. And we have to include intent language specifically saying critical theory will not be advocated for by our teachers or upon our teachers. And that is why we need to say no this first time. And we need to say, please, just add that intent language in there, so when the school districts make the decision on what trainings that they have, because we just start looking at all these teacher trainings. We've got one here, TRIO teacher prep, and the name of the training is for social justice and critical theory. And one of these catchphrases that keeps coming up that I think we need to call our attention to is the word equity. Equity in their own language is not equality. Equity in their language is a redistribution of resources to make sure that there is equity for everybody. Redistribution of resources is not equality, it's socialism, and it's political in content, and it does not need to be in our education system or in our $1.1 billion budget for our teachers. I love our teachers, but when they are required to go through this professional development training advocating for critical theory, here's what comes of it. And so I am going to point you to the back of my handout, because I think this is a...
Stop. All right, so this handout was previously objected to, I believe, by you when the gentleman from 29 wanted to use it. Now we're using it in the same debate without unanimous consent or, so it was not right there. It's not right now unless you ask the body and they give you permission.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask unanimous consent to reference a picture on the back of a handout that was provided to legislators.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will save the body the time of doing a motion, and I will just summarize the things that I've experienced and an example that I was given from a local substitute teacher, where in the classroom that he was substituting for, specifically up on the wall, there was a whole display where it said, "Explorers are wanted." And it listed a whole bunch of different explorers that are very historical, prominent figures in our American history. But it wasn't historical explorers wanted in a positive reference. It was actually in a negative reference. And so when there were these pictures of Christopher Columbus and Vasco da Gama and Juan Ponce de Leon. And it didn't just say wanted, it says wanted dead or alive. And when they start talking about Christopher Columbus, what these students were taught and what they put up on these pictures specifically talked about how horrible Christopher Columbus is. And then on one of the pictures, what's really interesting is that you would have all the children's writing of what they thought. And then in a red pen, in adult handwriting, on one of the explorers, so it's not a student's handwriting, it says, "We want him alive so that we can kill him ourselves." That's the historical revisionism that is going on. And we just need it to stop, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, good lady. Is there further debate? For the first time, good gentleman from District 17.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I served on JFAC in 15 and 16, and when I was on JFAC, I thought we weren't supposed to get into policy, and we were supposed to make budgets. There was a lot of criticism of JFAC at that time that JFAC was getting into policy, and that they didn't have public hearings, which is absolutely true. There's not a lot of room for public input. And so then it was decided, or at least the directive was, we're not going to do policy. We're not going to have, there's usually legislative intent language and that kind of thing. That was limited, and it was limited for the exact purpose that we're seeing today. There's been no public hearing if this goes back to JFAC and they make another budget. There's been no public comment. There's been no involvement, very little. This should go through the Education Committee. It should go through a process. As for the budget, which I think is really the germane debate here, you know, on March 10th of 2021, we had 46 districts brought $299 million in bonds and levies, and voters approved $224 million in ballot measures. Remember, that's property tax money, and property taxes are not terribly popular. The people, the voters, the people with kids in school, they want a budget for their kids that's adequate, that works, and that attracts teachers to the profession and attracts teachers to the very, very important job they have. If there's a problem with policy, let's go through the education committees, but let's pass this budget, which really, in my view, I'm having a hard time voting for because I don't think it's enough, especially considering that there's another $224 million in property tax levies that were made in March, and property taxes will either stay the same or go up for many of our citizens. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate? For the first time for the last time, lady from 30 for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, the good lady from 7 happened to point out one of the points I was going to make, which is we need the intent language to apply to the $9 million dedicated to professional development, not the $1.1 billion for teacher salary. And she articulated that, so I won't repeat that. I would argue that non-discrimination policies are already in place, from the comments that were read from the good lady from District 7 to our own Constitution to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Yet this is happening in our public schools. And under a new administration at the federal level, Office of Civil Rights violations, Title VI, are being suspended that specifically segregated students and faculty on the basis of race, and they were treated differently on the basis of race. This is already policy. It's national, federal policy. However, it is not being enforced. And in the month since this bill came out of JFAC, things have changed. Just like in higher education, more examples are coming forward, and the enforcement level at the federal government appears to be abandoning certain aspects of the Civil Rights Act. That's not okay for Idaho public schools. Actions at the federal level are also deeply troubling to me around national standards, assessment, and curriculum. We've heard several curricula mentioned on the floor here today. They are deeply troubling curricula. And it is entirely appropriate for us to tie strings, the same way the federal government ties strings to our funding, to the use of the professional development dollars, that they not be used in a discriminatory way. That's why I believe this budget needs to return to JFAC to make it clear that that $9 million shall not be used to support discriminatory policies at all, anywhere, against our teachers, against our students, or that teaching that would be okay. We do have laws and policy in place, but apparently we need to restate it, and I am fully supportive of that in this budget, Mr. Speaker, and ask that, again, it be returned to the Joint Finance and Appropriation to make it clear that the use of the professional development dollars may not be used for discriminatory training that promotes discriminatory practices. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate? For the second time, the lady from 33.
Would the good lady from 30 stand for a question?
Will the lady yield?
The lady yields.
Yields.
Mr. Speaker, good lady, if this bill were to be returned to you, would the intent be to also cut monies that are in the current allocation right now, or would the intent be to add language?
Lady from 30.
Mr. Speaker, good lady from 33, I can only speak for myself. It would not be the intent, my intent, to cut any funding from this unless we have to make a change of $100. We may. I don't actually know if just changing intent language satisfies our rules. It does not. So apparently we'll have to add or subtract $100. I'll vote to add it. Okay? But the intent language is what I'm after, personally.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate? Lady from 26.
Thank you. To debate a second time.
Have the floor.
Well, thank you. As I looked at the budget, I too sat on JFACT at one point. We did reduce $9 million from the professional development piece, but this was also the body that put in the professional development requirement that teachers have to have local controlled professional development. That became part of our requirements as teachers. We all have to make a district approved plan. That's part of our evaluation system. It is local control. Our professional development plans as teachers to grow, to work with what our district's overall goal, strategic plan is approved. Locally controlled professional development plans. As we see and have statements, I honestly don't know where some of these things came from, and I don't know the goal of the lesson plan. Are we just cherry picking those lesson plans? Is this a critical thought process? Is this a debate? We used to have Envirothon. We still do have Envirothon in our district. You should have heard the debates that the kids had to research and do. Two sides of the story. They were awesome. Did they always agree? Oh, gads. As most of you know, we are cattle ranchers. I'll never forget my son coming home and had to take his opposite point of view. It was the best assignment in the world because it truly taught him that there are two sides to every story. Are we just looking at one part of it? JFACT has worked very hard on this. Again, this is not the place for policy. This is the place, the budget. They've worked diligently on this. The budget took $9 million out of professional development. We need to pass this budget. Moving on, this gives our teachers what we've promised them all along for their hard work. And I think this is the time that this body needs to step up and say, let's pass this.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 16.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for a second time.
You have the floor.
Thank you. And just very briefly, I just wanted, as we're discussing professional development, the professional development that I had to take at the start of the school year did not include anything on critical race theory or critical theory or any of that. The closest thing to that, I would say, in my school district, was specific to Title I schools. And it's for those students, for those teachers who would administer breakfast and lunch programs for those Title I students. so that the teachers understand that we need to treat all the students with respect, that kind of a thing. But this notion of critical race theory being incorporated into professional development, at least that, for me this year, has not been my experience.
Is there further debate?
Would the lady from 30 yield to a question?
Will the good lady yield to a question?
The lady yields.
The lady yields.
Given our late stage of our session, I just want to make sure, I think I heard this, but we can go back to JFAC, add intent language on the $9 million, increase the teacher's budget by $100, and get that done rather rapidly so we ensure that our teachers have the monies they need. Is that correct?
Lady from 30.
Mr. Speaker, good gentleman from 4, thank you. That is my opinion, yes, that we can act very quickly on this and get it back within the next day or two.
Thank you.
Is there, for what purpose does the good lady rise?
Would the good lady from 30 yield to another question? Clarification question, Mr. Speaker.
Will the lady yield?
The lady yields, Mr. Speaker.
Lady yield.
Mr. Speaker, good lady. There's been a lot said about intent language, having not been in JFAC. Is it a common practice to put some intent language with most of the bills that you pass?
Lady from 30.
Mr. Speaker, good lady from 33. Yes, many budget bills have intent language.
Thank you.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 12, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to make a few clarifications, if I might.
And we're at the second debate. You'd need to ask permission of the body to debate for the first time.
Would ask, you're going to object? All right.
I believe that's procedurally correct. Yep. For what purpose does the gentleman from 16 rise?
Would the good gentleman from District 12 stand for a question? Yield to a question?
Will the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee yield to question?
He certainly will.
That one yields.
Good gentleman, Mr. Chairman, good gentleman, is there anything that would prohibit us from passing this budget today and then following up with a trailer appropriation that included the intent language that has been requested?
No, from 12.
Mr. Speaker, good gentleman from District 16, no, there's nothing that could happen rather easily. And in addition to that, if I might, to answer that question, Mr. Speaker, the process of making a budget bill come back, there are 5 of these budgets, would not happen in a couple of days. You're talking 3 to 4 days to get that process, depending on what we do with the other 4 bills as well. It might take, who knows, a week. So something that this body may want to consider. So, Mr. Speaker, I didn't know if the gentleman had further question.
Gentleman from 16?
No, Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Is there further debate for the second time? Hearing none? Will the good gentleman from District 23 please stand and close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've had some good conversations about education. I'd like to address 3 things that have come up in the debate. I'd like to touch a little bit, real quick, on professional development. I'd like to touch base real quick on standards. And I'd like to touch real quick on the idea of protecting teachers and students. All 3 things that came up so far in the debate. Professional development. I was racking my brain. And here's my list. These are the things that I have participated in professional development, and I really do not think I'm unique Literacy. How to build a Canvas module. We came in last spring and none of us knew how to build a Canvas module. Who knows what a Canvas module is? Okay, a Canvas module is the online forum through which we instruct. We had to all learn how to be online teachers. Career technical education. You want to talk about a hot topic item that we want professional development on in Owyhee County, Elmore County, and Twin Falls County, and I'm pretty darn sure in your county, it's career technical education. Let's get these kids ready for what's the next step. College, work, licensing, all those things. And we're dealing with bills in here all the time on those things. Best practices in education. You want to go spend a couple of fun hours, you go to a professional development where teachers share how they do things. And you watch another teacher teach and you say, I never thought of that. Blended classroom. How do I teach online and in person at the same time with kids doing both? I needed professional development. College prep. And the list could go on with these type of topics. These are the type of things that we do in professional development. It's what it sounds like. How do I be a better teacher? That's what professional development is. And you know who chooses the professional development? Your school board. Your buildings and your superintendents are going to have ideas, but when they need funding, when they need permission, they go to the local school board. We have oversight there. Standards. I don't teach anything that's not a standard. When we went on recess, this is neither good nor bad, better or worse. It was just the reality. Guess where I was? Room 17, Mountain Home High School. And guess what we did? We did the second and third reading calendar. I took those students through the second and third reading calendar. And you know why I could take them through the second and third reading calendar? Because the state standard that we pass allows me to teach local and state government. I follow the standards. We follow the standards, and guess what happens to a teacher that doesn't? The school board. The school board, the school board, the school board. I agree. Protect teachers, protect students. When I decided to run for statewide office, sometimes you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. Well, I have, for all my experiences and all the things I know, I live in a huge agricultural area. So my learning curve about ag is huge. I spent an afternoon on a sugar beet truck, and I'm going to get the words wrong here. Greatest guy in the world. Doesn't mean I'm a sugar beet farmer, but I have some insight and I have a contact. Here is my point about, I'm sorry.
You have an objection, madam? That he was on a beet truck? Really?
I'm sorry. I will go back to standards. Forget the fact that I was on a beet truck. It was not a pretty sight, as was.
All right. Please continue your closing debate.
Protect. We want to protect our teachers, and we want to protect our students. Here's what I want us to do. There's 70 of us here. Intent language, we follow the standards. We follow the standards. So if your intent language tells me to follow the standard, we already have it. I challenge all of us, and this is why I brought up the beet truck. If we want to protect our teachers and our students, for you guys, a lot of you guys are ag experts. So your beet truck is the classroom. Go into a classroom. Know the teachers. Know the process. This budget's a good budget. This budget, everything that we've talked about policy-wise, we can address other places. But teachers follow the standards. Our professional development is how to be a better teacher. And as legislators, we want to protect our teachers and we want to protect our students. Call them on the phone and say, can I spend the day? Can I spend the afternoon? Can I talk to the students? I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Debate is closed. The question before the House is, shall House Bill number 354 pass the House? The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will record their votes. Has every member voted? Representative Shepherd, you got to vote. Huh? Does any member wish to change his vote? The clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. The vote count shows 34 in favor with 34 against and 2 absent. House Bill 354 has failed to pass the House and will be retained in the office of the Chief Clerk.